Morning, everyone. Evolutionary.org hardcore podcast coming your way. Episode 123. Big Ramy, Stevesmi here, and Da Mobster in the house. What's up, buddy?
Let's do this. He is the man of the moment, people. We're gonna smash this one. We're gonna have a great one.
So Big Ramy, 2020 MrOlympia champion, Mobster. Give us his full name.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. And I will try not to murder the last name. It's Mamdouh Mohammed Hassan Elssbiay. And I may be slightly mispronouncing his last name, but the Egyptians following us will have to forgive me. So there you go. There's his name. He is 36 years of age, born September the 16th, 1984. Do you want to tell everybody where he was born there, Steve?
Yeah, so he was born in Baltam, Kafr El Sheikh, Egypt. His family was into fishing. He's currently living in Kuwait, married with 3 daughters. He has had a history, guys. You can check him out on his Instagram page if you look at Big Ramy Instagram. He's been a lot of competitions, guys, over the years. He's done personal training, fitness coach, and he's a businessman, entrepreneur. So after his MrOlympia champion, we should see him definitely grow on that. So MrOlympia, he walked away with a $400,000 prize, and he is basically, we think in the next few years he's got a shot at winning some more MrOlympias if he can stay healthy and he can keep things going in the right direction. So we're gonna get into that. We're going to get into his controversies. We're going to get into his diet, his nutrition, his training, and his steroid cycles that we speculate that he ran based on some, inside information sent to the show. So it's going to be a really, really fun show, guys. So, like Mobster said, he was born in 84, modest. It seems like he had a modest lifestyle growing up. He moved to Kuwait. After he completed his education, he wanted to get more into the fitness world. He took a really big liking to fitness at a young age. He attended a gym called Oxygen Gym, and now he kind of piggybacked that. He got the some competitions he did extremely well on. He won his pro card, and then from there, he ended up doing. I can go through and list you guys. The big one, the Kuwait Golden Cup, that was in 2012. The Amateur Olympia in 2012. The New York Pro in 2013. The MrOlympia in 2013, 8th place. The New York Pro Championship in 2013. He won that, first place. Then the next year, MrOlympia, he was 7th place. That was 2014. Then 5th in 2015 at MrOlympia. 4th in 2016 at MrOlympia. He won the Kuwait IFBB Pro in 2016. He got 2nd at the MrOlympia in 2017. He got 6th MrOlympia in 2018. Then 2019, which we're going to talk about his controversies in now. That was one of his controversies in 2019. He was unable to compete in that due to an injury, and so he kind of fell off on that. And then in 2020, he had to get some points to be able to get into the 2020 MrOlympia. You can't just sign up for MrOlympia like, hey, I want to. It's kind of like the Masters golf tournament. You've got to qualify. And he wasn't able to qualify. So Mobster is going to get into that controversy. Imagine had he not qualified for the 2020 MrOlympia, what would have happened? We would have had a completely different winner. So it completely changed the trajectory of the MrOlympia. So I'm going to bring in Mobster. Tell us about the 2020 Big Ramy controversies.
So Steve says quite correctly, there's a point system that has been put in place for the last couple of years. You either won big competitions and they automatically qualified you, or what's happened more recently, as I say, the last couple of years, is you've had a point system. So say you won the Arnold, or you previously won the Olympia. In fact, previously winning the Olympia, you were guaranteed a spot. So you've got Phil Heath, for example, returning this year, gets the walk in, he doesn't need to qualify at all. He's a previous winner. It's a done and dusted deal. But what about the rest of the pack? Well, pretty much the first 4 or 5 places, the first 4 or 5 seats were filled, Steve. But then we get into the point system. And unfortunately, COVID-19 has thrown a spanner in the works for just about everybody. Competitions were being cancelled left, right, and centre. People couldn't fly, and this is what happened to Big Ramy. He had a couple of competitions earlier this year that he could have qualified for, but Steve says he's come off the back of that shoulder injury. So the first competition, it was getting to be one of the last competitions of the season before everything went pear-shaped, and it was meant to go to Australia. Tony Doherty's competition, come over, compete in Australia, just get the 3 points, 6 points, whatever, and that's it. You can come, you're going to be in the MrOlympia. And then he goes from Kuwait to Dubai, and Australia is closed. Dubai then gets closed. The only way he can get out of Dubai is to go, I think, to another country, meets his family there, but now he's stuck there. So he's got one more competition he can do, and again, this is closed off. He can't move. He gets tested. I think literally the flight, he was meant to take the flight 3 days to catch that last chance to qualify. And the government the authorities there say we need anybody that's going to fly to be COVID-19 tested, and he gets a positive test. So he can't fly. He's got no chance of qualifying whatsoever. It's all gone. Any chances the early season's gone, any chance of the late season's gone. So what does he do? Well, the Olympia organisers have for some years had a special invite, and they consider Big Ramy as worthy of this special invitation. So now we've got the controversy. We're thinking, should Big Ramy have got the special invite? Was there someone else more worthy of the special invite? Well, of course, Steve, what's happened? They give him the special invite. He makes a sensible approach, which you and I have addressed in the MrOlympia podcast, which will be live soon, to get to America early. I believe something like 20 days before the competition, just last weekend, as we do this podcast. And he's with Dennis James. He gets there, he trains. In fact, I've just seen today a traveling to America photograph by Chad Nichols, which showed him in great condition. It's Dennis James on point, Chad Nichols on point, and he's in the country ahead of time. And of course, the controversy works out great. The invitation works out great. Just about the best way possible, Steve, by a Big Ramy winning the MrOlympia, coming in on point. And I believe he said something previously, is the most popular win of any athlete, because even though we're talking about week later, human nature being what it is, there's still no doubt from any quarter, by any report, by any article, as to whether he should have won or not. He was the best athlete on stage. All of those issues, all of the hurdles he's had to overcome, special invite just to get there, and he wins. So it's kind of like, it's almost like a story, Steve. If we were doing a documentary, it'd be one of those great endings, and it's worked out just fine. So let's get on to the next stuff.
Yeah, so let's kind of get into his nutrition, guys, and then we're going to talk about his training, and then what you guys are all waiting for, his steroid cycles. So, Big Ramy, we actually looked into this a little bit because of Big Ramy's religion, being a Muslim, he does fast during Ramadan. So I looked it up for 2020, and Ramadan in 2020 was back in May. It was from the end of April to the end of May. It's basically one straight month of fasting. You fast from sunrise to sunset. So then I researched what hours was sunrise and what hours was sunset in Kuwait during the month of May. And it says here 5 a.m. to 6 p.m. So he was fasting for 11 straight hours. And so in this type of situation, the way he would approach his diet, and Mobster pointed this out to me earlier, he was getting 3 meals during that.
That's what he was getting, yeah.
Eating window. So he would either eat 2 meals before, he'd get up early, eat 2 meals before sunrise, or he would eat 1 meal before sunrise and then 2 meals after sunset. So, but you were not allowed to eat or drink while the sun was up from 5 a.m. to 6 p.m. So this is really interesting, and this is something that we're going to talk about. I'm going to talk about for sure on the forums, how the MrOlympia champion, who was 350 pounds in the off season, actually fasted for 1 month where he was not eating for 11 straight hours. And then he was not eating again for 8 straight hours while he was sleeping. So basically he was not eating for 19 hours out of the 24 hours and only eating for about 5 hours. So so I'm pretty sure that he didn't lose his muscle, and his muscles pretty much didn't disappear, and his size didn't disappear. Ironically, this probably gave him an advantage over the other
Yeah,
competitors, because
yeah,
he was
yeah.
able to actually recycle those cells in his body and help his gut health, and it allowed him to get stronger during this month. So we see this. There's 1 billion people in the world who actually do practice Ramadan, and they fast for 1 month. And it actually is something really, really interesting. I wonder if other competitors will kind of follow this strategy.
Something else, Steve, is that Chad had this thing where he says, with all of the athletes that he's put through the Mr. Olympia, that includes the Mr. Olympia in the case of his wife, he likes to deplete them and take them just up down as little of carbs and see where they're going to go, as a great way of testing their response when you put nutrition back in. And as an example, in the run up to the Mr. Olympia, you had Big Ramy complaining about how depleted he was and how terrible he felt, etc., etc. And you've got Chad saying that's exactly how you're supposed to feel. Now, with the practices of fasting, it's only going to help, because you're having all that time, as you said, training on next to nothing. And I believe at the one point on the run up to the Mr. Olympia, bearing in mind, as Steve said, 350 pounds in the off season, coming down to 310 with a 290 pound stage weight, he had him on 150 grams of carbs per day. At that size, Steve, that's just crazy. But as you say, it proves that we can survive, that we can succeed, and the best the best bodybuilder on the planet can do exactly what you just said, 100%.
So this is an example of what he would do. Say, he's not allowed to eat after 5 a.m. So he'd wake up at 4, and he'd have an hour to eat. So right off the bat, bunch of eggs, sweet potato. He could have that early. Get in a chicken breast early. Some rice, and that's a hell of a meal right there. And then after he could train, go to the gym and train. You're allowed to train during the daylight hours. You're just not allowed to have sex. So he'd have to wait to have sex with his wife, after dinner in the evening. So I actually looked into this, so I confirmed this. And
Personal
yeah,
research.
so you can train. And there was another Hakeem Olajuwon. He was an NBA, one of the best NBA centers in the world, and he actually fasted. And Ramadan was during the NBA playoffs, and he performed amazingly well. And that's exactly what he did. He would eat, before sunrise, and he eat in the evening, and it completely did not affect his performance. So let me give you an example, Mobster, of a dinner that he would eat: a 10-ounce steak, a salad, some more rice, and it was just a completely cookie cutter diet. It wasn't that complicated, and it worked beautifully for him during Ramadan. Yeah.
I'm going to say two things here. One, with both these athletes that we've mentioned, yes, some people are going to say, yeah, but they're genetics freaks, Steve. They can do this, that, and the other. The truth of the matter is, and Steve and I have talked about this before on the forums, and it's one of those things that we need to reiterate. We need to hammer this point home. The human body is incredibly adaptive. Yes, we might be talking about PEDs assisting Big Ramy here, but the basketball player won't have been on a load of drugs, Steve. You're going to be, if you are physically fit, if you are physically strong, if you are a highly tuned athlete, and you have the genetic advantages, and then you've got the human body's ability to adapt. It knows it's going to get nutrition. The brain's going to tell it. It's not, if you filled up with carbs at 5 o'clock in the morning, you're going to have some energy later on. The body will adapt. You won't starve to death. No one's having heart attacks because they've had an 8-hour fast, not unless they had pre-existing medical issues. And again, he won the Mr. Olympia in spite of all the issues, dieting, fasting, everything. So as Steve says, and again, let's do the bodybuilding food thing again, as you just said, Steve. It doesn't need to be complicated. It really doesn't. You need just to be fuel efficient when you're doing this stuff. So yeah, up at 5 eating, probably went back to bed for an hour or two after that. You're not training at 6 o'clock in the morning, so you can go back and chill. Sit around the house sipping water, just watching early morning TV, stretching, doing whatever the hell he needs to do until it's time to go to the gym. He's got that food in, he's ready to rock and roll. And he can come back from the gym straight after, chill out for the rest of the day, relax for the rest of the day, and then just look forward to those 2 meals in the evening. If he can do it, you can do it. And if you can do it, the whole of humanity can do it. There's no excuse. Unless you've got a medical reason, you're in hospital or something like that. This is proof that such a system works. There you go, Steve.
Yeah. So, get into his training a little bit, Mobster. Would you dig up on his training?
Right. So I mean, this is the thing with this. He's had, when he was with Oxygen Gym, and he no longer is. You've had a series of videos. There's some motivational, Machiavelli motivational stuff out there. You see him training, and there's a kind of thing where you don't think he's that strong. He doesn't look that strong. Lots of volume type training, lots of machine type workouts, and then you get the odd little shot in these videos that shows you something special is going on. Now, he's one of those guys with his legs that doesn't need to do great big leg workouts every single week. I'm going to say every 10 days. But then there's a video with him doing 36 20-kilogram plates. That's 720 kilogram plates. Sorry, 720 kilos on the leg press for multiple reps. I believe one of the leg workouts shot around the same time. They rack the weights on and then they rack the weights off. So that's a pyramiding up and pyramiding down as one giant Steve. I believe he worked up to something stupid like 20 plates, and then they start taking the plate off each side. So 20 plates, 18 plates, and this is a back down set. Now, I don't think necessarily he needs to do that kind of stuff all the time, but my God, he's got some Tom Platz-esque type wheels there. So whatever the hell he's doing for his legs is working. And another example of his strength, and again, it's one of those, you don't see it a lot, but you can find this if you search for it, 6 plates aside squats. So if it's 45 plates off the top of my head, that's around 580, 590. And if it's 20 kilogram plates, it's only a little less. And he's repping it like it's nothing, Steve. And then finally, one other example is again of strength. And again, he's a big guy, but you don't have to be massively strong to be a guy, not with his genetics. But I'm pretty sure that he was using some rubber-coated dumbbells, but they look like a pair of 150s. So it's one of those things where he's a big, strong guy who can demonstrate his strength, but there's quite a bit of volume in there. One of the things that was coming out of the Oxygen stuff is that with the coaches that he was working with, you've got people there setting the weights up for you, setting the machines up for you, and they're training all the angles. As part of his approach to this year's MrOlympia, they had him doing depleting workouts, literally to take the glycogen out pretty much every day that he's with Dennis James over in Arizona, pre the MrOlympia in Florida. So there's those kind of things. So you've got depleting workouts, take the glycogen out, carb loading, manipulate, see how he responds, and there's that stuff. And again, I believe with Dennis James, is one of those guys, because of his knowledge, because of his experience, because of his specifically a MrOlympia experience, all the guys that he's coached on hands-on, that lived with him hands-on in the way that what Big Ramy did, they listen to what Dennis has to say. And again, it's one of those guys, he knows what you should look like on stage. So fine-tuning. But you're in the last 2 to 3 weeks, Steve. You're not going to gain 5 pounds of muscle. You're not suddenly going to be looking crazy, whatever else. But if there's a way of getting a glycogen out of muscle, to be crude, if there's a way of fucking you up when you're in a competition prep, then Dennis knows how to do it. And he's bringing that stuff in. But there's, like I said, there's a ton of motivational videos you guys can search for. You can see some of the training out there. But here's the thing. There is never, ever going to be some sort of secret thing that he's doing that you can't do for yourself. So by all means, search for it. You'll see the stuff that I'm on about, but it's not going to be any great secret to the training. But yes, a big, strong fella. You can find his videos, 720 kilo leg press, 6 plates aside for squats, 150-pound dumbbell presses. That's in each hand. He's a big, strong guy and looks it, 100%.
So let's talk about his steroid cycles, guys. That's really what you guys want to know. So there was according to this article, some of the trainers at Oxygen Gym leaked the off-season cycle that took Ramy from 200 pounds to 280 pounds in a single year. Now, I don't even believe this cycle. It is insane. So I'm gonna read you what it lists here. And I find this even hard to believe, but I'm going to tell you what this says here. It said he took 18 IUs per day of HGH. He took 5 IUs of insulin before meals. That insulin HGH, that's like peanut butter and jelly. Okay, they kind of help each other, right? The HGH drives up your blood sugar, your insulin resistance. The insulin comes in there and it provides that sponge effect. Then he was on testosterone enanthate, 5,000 milligrams per week. Wow, that is a lot, guys. I find it hard to believe he was on that much, but that's what it says here. Trenbolone enanthate, 3,000 milligrams a week. Oh my gosh, I would die on even 500 milligrams a week. I can't even imagine taking 3,000 milligrams a week. This is insane. Equipoise. Hey, why not? Equipoise, 3,000 milligrams a week. Decadurabolin, 2,000 milligrams a week. Dianabol, 100 milligrams a day. Anadrol, 300 milligrams a day. And on top of that, he was taking some myostatin, GDF8 blocking peptides, which allows him to grow. So, gosh, I mean, I don't believe this cycle personally, but this gives you an idea of some of the rumors going around. I would say, you know, his cycle probably was like a fraction of that, but still is a ton of freaking gear he was using. What do you think, Mobster, about that? That seems insane.
I think I heard the same rumor that everybody else did when this list was of pharmaceutical products was given out. And I'll tell you what I think, Steve. I think there's one of those situations in Kuwait, and this happens. It happened. Listen, if you win the lottery, guys, people are going to be jealous. So you've got this freak that's gone from 200 pounds to 300 pounds to 350 pounds recently, and he leaves Oxygen Gym. Now, I don't think he was leaving Oxygen Gym around the time this cycle was leaked, but I suspect what he's done is he's switched coaches. And someone somewhere has got really upset, kind of pissed off, and said, you know what? I'm going to put the smackdown on this guy, and I'm going to say that he was doing these kind of crazy numbers. Now, I think Steve and I would agree that it's entirely possible that he was taking all these drugs, but at the amounts that are suggested, no, absolutely not. I think we have to accept, whether we like it or not, that Big Ramy was a hyper responder. He looked like a good medium to high level bodybuilder when he was 200 pounds. He had traps, he had delts, even the shape was there. Hairy, he still had hair on his head, his kind of hairy body, but he looked like a muscular guy. This was a guy that was just doing PT and tidying up, putting the weights back on the racks and stuff like that. This is before Beta took him on board, before Oxygen Gym adopted him, and before the coaches started working with him. So I reckon that the guys have said there, you know what, to use the English phrase, they've slagged him off, and they've created this monstrous cycle because this is the only reason it is this big guy. Now, do we think he's using HGH and insulin? Yes. It's something that Steve said before, and I agree. Whether I need it or Steve needs it is something else. At the level that Big Ramy's at, it's kind of a given. You need to be doing this kind of stuff. Now, with his hyper responder physique, he's going to do really well. But 36 IUs a day, Steve, no. Probably upper limit, in my opinion, would be around 12. And as we know, I don't like any guys running HGH at that high of an amount, even at 12 for long periods of time. Insulin again, sure. Test propionate, 1,000 milligrams a day. No, I'd cut that in half. For him, I'd cut that in half. Tren, 500 milligrams a day. No, quite simply no. Tren in his cycle, yeah. In his cycle for the training that he was doing, the way that he looked in the off season, I see one of the videos, he's stretching, he's doing a quad stretch, his legs are covered in veins. He's doing, as I've already said, the amount of weight he was on the leg press and the amount of weight he's doing on the squat. So yeah, in his cycle, for sure. But 500 milligrams a day, no. I think it's just one of those kind of hateful things. Oral Anavar, 100 milligrams a day. Yes, that's probably, it's way more than we would normally recommend for an athlete. But again, it's Big Ramy, it's a professional bodybuilder, he's trying to become Mr. Olympia. It's high, but it's not crazy high. The Winstrol, no. Again, if he is using it, and again, specifically the comment that was made at the time was pre-contest, then yes, pre-contest. Out of contest, out of season, no, for nothing. The T3, probably not. I recall, in fact, doing the research for this podcast, you've got Chad Nichols again talking about specifics of blood tests and health results for Big Ramy. And one of the things we said actually off air, Steve, was that he, at 350 pounds, he'd had a blood test result and his blood pressure was, I believe, a tiny bit above the norm. And at 350 pounds at 5'9", you'd actually expect, and something Chad specifically said was, and I'm assuming he says that in basis of the other athletes he's worked with, at that height and that weight, athletes tend to be having to take some sort of blood pressure medication. And indeed, we've addressed that on the forums when we talk about body weight and taking steroids on your blood pressure. So keep that in mind, people. If you get really big and you're training crazy and you're using high doses of PEDs, then your blood pressure tends to go higher than it should. And if you do go for a checkup, as we would say, a medical examination and or blood test, then you're going to see some numbers creep up. So my thing is, I don't think that because of CT3, it's maybe, Steve, pre-competition. Clenbuterol, 200 micrograms a day. No. Anybody who uses a small amount, recommended daily doses of clenbuterol know just how awful some people feel on it. Maybe is incredibly lucky, but I doubt it. And I suspect it's one of those guys that doesn't need it. Diuretics, do you know what, Steve? I'm going to say yes at the time that the cycle was leaked, because we saw times when Ramy was amazing. The New York Pro is a good example, and we saw times when he wasn't. So I'm going to suggest that some of the gurus that he was working with in the past, and I'm thinking Chris Aceto specifically, may have played around with diuretics to try and get Ramy into just the kind of condition they wanted to, but they didn't have long enough with him. It wasn't working with him. They wasn't getting the results. When he left to go to a new guru or a new coach, no one had him long enough to go through these things and saw what worked and what didn't. So, I'm going to say that in the past, for sure, my gut feeling, and I'm just spinning a dice here and having a guess, as I don't think he used diuretics this time around. The photographs we've seen before he arrived in America, and the photographs and the videos we've seen once he did arrive in America, the condition was already there. If he was doing diuretics, it's literally 2 or 3 days before the competition, and that's it. So yeah, the numbers way above. We're laughing when we were doing it when Steve was reading out the list, because we're saying, yes, crazy. I suspect, like I said, some sort of silly person that's a bit upset with Ramy has decided to release this, not made up, just exaggerated. The list, I can see the drugs on this list as being used, but at the amounts, no. I mean, as you said already, Steve, and we'll talk about this now, 500 milligrams of trenbolone every day? Come on, you'd be out there with a machine gun. I think you've talked to, tell me, you've mentioned this before, but what is it? You've been on Tren. I've never used Tren. What would you feel like on 500 milligrams a day, Steve?
I mean, it'd be like you feel death. I mean, it's brutal. Yeah. You're so miserable on it.
So imagine yourself carb depleted. You've got Dennis James putting you through depletion workouts, and I decide to give you some Clen. And not only am I giving you a small amount of Clen, I'm supposed to be giving you 200 micrograms a day. No, can you imagine being on fire? Just those 2 drugs. Just those. Forget the rest, Steve. 500 milligrams a day of Tren and 200 micrograms a day. Oh man, you'd be going psycho. I mean, we'd have the Stevesmi serial killer.
You would have to be on like aspirin every day. Like I was running 50 milligrams of Winstrol and 350 milligrams of Tren a week, and I was getting migraine headaches every day just from that amount. And he's running these insane amounts. So these guys have to be, it is chemical warfare out there.
Warfare, yeah, no doubt at all. No doubt.
But you have to take a lot of other stuff to counteract this stuff. You've got to take a lot of aspirin. You got to take blood medication. And Mobster and I talked about it before, that he may have not been on blood pressure medication. I think that, I'm skeptical about that. I would like to see evidence.
Yeah.
Because there's no way at that size, your heart, your kidneys, your liver isn't under a tremendous amount of stress. So, yeah.
So that's something, actually, when I was listening to Chad talking about this stuff, what occurred to me, Stephen? It may sound unkind, guys, because I think, as I say, Big Ramy is an incredibly popular winner of this year's competition. If I was Big Ramy and I'm sitting over in Kuwait, Dubai, where I'm training at the minute, getting ready for the MrOlympia, talking to Mr. Chad, as Big Ramy was calling him, I would maybe have been tempted to produce a medical examination that gives exactly what Mr. Chad needs to hear, rather than a true reflection of exactly what my medical condition is. Because as a silly little example, right? If we train, we're breaking down muscle tissue, and it's got a lot of muscle tissue to break down. Diet is being depleted. I would actually expect, just on those 2 things alone, Steve, to see certain markers be slightly skewed in a blood test. The idea that he's so fit, I mean, this is the thing, right? Training gives you a small level of fitness over the man in the street. weight training, weightlifting, bodybuilding, you should be better than a guy your age that's never lifted a weight. But when you're 350 pounds, when you're moving 720 kilograms on a leg press, when you're prepping for Mr. Olympia, I would expect a few of your markers to be slightly off. Now, maybe what Chad means is they're within acceptable limits for a guy that's doing what he's doing. Maybe that's what he means. I'm being slightly jaded when I thought exactly what you just thought, is that a perfect result, a perfect test, blood pressure only slightly elevated. My blood pressure is quite good, and I'm a little bit less than what he is. But I think, again, that's just because I get out and I'm doing the walks. But there was times in his prep where you weren't even allowed to walk around. There was times during the prep where, when they said they were locking down the airports, they locked down the city. There was times when they weren't allowed to go out to the street to go for a walk. You've got guys, I'm talking about British bodybuilders in this country that were 5 a.m. walks and all this kind of stuff because they didn't want to be seen traveling around. They weren't sure what the rules are. So is he going to be doing fitness? Is he on the bike every day? Maybe. But I think it's incredibly unlikely that he's at 350 pounds coming back with his perfect results. It's really, and again, maybe he's a 1 in a billion. Maybe he is, Steve, but it's highly suspect. And even at the reduced amounts of PEDs that we were talking about, I'd expect to see some of the markers off, and then 350 pounds. He's 4 or 5 inches shorter than me and outweighs me by right this minute 32 pounds, and having perfect results. Lean, yeah, but perfect. No. I think it does sound, it smells a little bit. I'm trying to think of that phrase that The Rock uses, but can you smell what I'm cooking here, Steve? Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, and I was looking at up this research, and in Kuwait, I think a lot of us already know this, and you know this, Mobster. In Kuwait, steroids are completely legal. Like you can,
Yes.
and they're so legal over there, and there's such a environment for steroid use that the gym that we talked about earlier, Oxygen Gym,
Earlier, yes.
they're out in the parking lot. There's guys out in the parking lot selling steroids to people. It's just like it's just like in America going to the gym and walking in there, and you've got a smoothie. You can order a smoothie right there. That's how it is over there. Steroids it's not a big secret that these guys are using tons of steroids. So if you ever want to take a vacation to Kuwait, go to one of these gyms, you can just go buy steroids, just like buying a smoothie in an American gym.
I seem to recall that there was I think it was a British bodybuilder who I shan't name, saying that they had a pharmacy literally, if not in the building, just up the road from the building. You came out, you had the gym when he was working with Oxygen. You had the apartments where the guys stayed, and then just a few doors away was a pharmacy that they all used. Something else that we haven't addressed in the PEDs, this, Steve, which we have addressed when we've talked about the Middle East and the myths and the legends that have come out of the Kuwaiti gyms, including Oxygen, is the peptides. We said before that there was this idea that they had some sort of secret myostatin inhibitor stuff over there. I don't think that they do, but what they do have access to, as Steve said quite right, is pharmaceutical steroids, and we believe, if the rumors are correct, good quality, early, pretty much before anybody else had access to them, high quality, usable peptides. So there was this idea. I mean, the other thing which we've addressed with Oxygen Gym in previous podcasts is that the guys that were training there, and he's been adopted by Vader when he was with Oxygen, you are fed, you are watered, you are like a show pony. If there's probably some guy that's coming to your apartment to massage you. The guys were talking about if they almost trained as a team, if different levels of the gym, and they'd spend the rest of the day either doing what we're doing now on Zoom or talking to their families, or chilling out, or playing video games, and food would be delivered. There'll be somebody knocking on your door, dropping the food off. But with the pharmaceuticals on board as well, there's almost no excuse not to be an amazing bodybuilder. And the team, and again, they weren't taking genetically average people here, but the peptides, Steve, the SARMs, the access to this stuff, and I believe we're talking about probably about 6 to 8 months before it became popular across the world, and we started to see if people like our sponsors providing these kind of things. They had that stuff early at Oxygen, probably 2 to 3 years ago, and certainly 6 months to a year. I think they had access via perhaps a very friendly doctor at their pharmacy pharmacists for sure, that were sorting these guys out. So yeah, we're doing everything they needed to do: eating, resting, training, being coached, being massaged, literally treated like a thoroughbred racehorse, put out the stud, and then you've got the peptides to go with it, and pharmaceutical grade, over the counter prescription steroids. Again, zero excuses here not to grow, not to be a monster. And yet, of course, we will see Ramy not quite succeeding nearly. The New York Pro, that was the one that he sort of came on gangbusters. Then he'd be away. Then he wasn't quite on point, and his numbers were going up and down. Steve threw the numbers at you earlier on: 6th place, 7th place, 3rd place, 2nd place. But when he gets it together, bang! And I think Steve said right at the beginning, we've agreed with this in the MrOlympia podcast. Here's a guy that pretty much everybody, and it's not just Stevesmi and I, it's a bunch of other experts. When they were breaking down the results of the MrOlympia, everybody, including his competition, his rivals, the 2nd, the 3rd, the 4th, and the 5th place, everybody says if he can keep that kind of condition like he's got right now, 5 more MrOlympia, Steve, at least. And that's the thing. I think it's been an incredibly popular decision, very little negativity, almost none whatsoever. The guys that he beat have congratulated him. Everybody says.
Tell us about his what happened when he went back to Egypt.
Yeah, I said you just reminded me, and I was just thinking literally as you said. I was right. Okay, so here's the thing. Let's finish on this. Steve and I touched on this in a previous podcast, and we said that when Big Ramy goes back to the Middle East, it's gonna be crazy. And guess what, Steve? It's been crazy, and it's only been a week. He arrives at the airport in America to go back to Egypt, and there was a congratulations Big Ramy balloon on the desk. There's no one at the desk, it's just him. The guys are going crazy at the airport. He goes down the ramp to the plane, Steve, and there's balloons. Congratulations, Big Ramy. Everybody's there. They're taking photographs. The flight crew are taking pictures of him. He gets onto the plane. When he's on the plane, in Egyptian and in English, they announced that we have Big Ramy, the MrOlympia 2020 reader. And that was just the beginning, Steve. It was, the scenes at the airport, when they've got what looks like Egyptian military and security walking in through the airport indoors, was mental. And then he goes outdoors. People were just trying to touch him, Steve, like he's a good luck charm. There was a double-decker tour bus, shrink-wrapped, with a Big Ramy face and MrOlympia. There are trucks with signs on the back with Big Ramy, and then it's just driving through Cairo. He's part of something called the KO squad. They put on a press conference. There, I believe he was interviewed around that time by 40 Middle Eastern channels. I don't know. And here's the thing, Steve, and I touched on this before, right? And in fact, again, it's been addressed by Chad and others. No, MrOlympia, and I've got a reasonably good working knowledge from the very first Larry Scott till now. And I don't care how popular any of those athletes have been, Lee Haney, Ronnie Coleman, they've never had a reception like this. Never. And it's been 1 week, Steve. That's something that Steve and I said in the pre-show. He's going to need to be crazy careful that he actually finds time to get in the gym and work out. Because I think the next 2 to 3 weeks in Egypt, if he gets the current chance to go back to Kuwait, it's going to be so crazy at the airport. It's going to be so crazy with people wanting to talk to him. If the reception's been just about as good as it's possible to be, Steve, the opportunities, like you and I said in another show, are going to be off the scale. And if he doesn't double or triple his prize money in the next couple of weeks, I'll be surprised. Every single thing I've seen him doing in the last week that had because he of course he won the People's Award. So he's had the belt, the People's Award belt, the Sandow Trophy, the medals, and they've been on display every single time. You've got them on the Egyptian flag. You've got a picture of him staying at a hotel with the pyramids in the background. I believe he had a letter from the Egyptian president. I'd be very surprised if he's not meeting politicians right now. It's going to be in a scale that no MrOlympia has had ever, right from the beginning back in the 60s. And that's just, I mean, honestly, thousands of people. Steve's seen the videos that I've seen, hundreds in the airport, thousands outside, crowds, people waving him, cars tooting, absolutely crazy. you'd have to win the Mr. Olympia and go back to a small town in the middle of nowhere, America, Midwest or something like that, and have half the town turn out. This was like, I think, especially once the TV broadcast and the interviews have gone out, it's going to be thousands of people, absolutely thousands.
It's kind of weird. It's kind of weird because you ask an American, a typical American, you know, who was an American that won Mr. Olympia, they won't know. Like, who was the last American to win Mr. Olympia? It was just a year ago, but they wouldn't know that. But if you ask them, you know, who won the Super Bowl, they would, you know, if they're a sports fan, they would know that right off the bat. So I think it's interesting. And over there, everybody knows about Big Ramy. Everybody in Egypt, where he was born, in Kuwait, where he moved to. And when he gets, you know, any Middle Eastern country he could go to, North African, Middle Eastern, South Asian, any of those countries, they'll know who Big Ramy is. Especially if you're a young or middle-aged male, you're gonna look at him, and a lot of females as well. And you know, he's gonna be a big celebrity. I think it's gonna cause the bodybuilding in those countries to grow tremendously, and it's gonna have a huge effect. So a lot of supplement companies need to be aware of this, and they need to be able to market in those countries. All right, buddy.
You're right there.
All right, so for that's it, guys. This was a Big Ramy episode for Stevesmi and Da Mobster. We will talk to you guys next week with another one. Take care, guys.
See you soon. Ta-da.